Lascian Corla, and the Minister referred to a crisis that's playing out in fast forward, or at least in real time on our media channels and our social media channels indeed. But there's also a catastrophe playing out in slow motion here in terms of the Russian aggression in Ukraine. We know that Ukraine alone provides the wheat supply for more than half of the world food programmes, and there's going to be huge implications for people across the developing world as expected crop crises are seen on foot at the invasion. Have we any plans in terms of overseas development aid?
Thank you. Given the important role the World Food Programme's system together providing 12% of world trade calories, food security has been damaged by the Russian invasion of Ukraine. The most immediate impact has been the significant increase in price, obviously, of wheat, sunflower, fertiliser, which is already affecting food prices in import-dependent poorer countries. With fertiliser prices increasing, food production prices will also increase, reducing farm incomes, just as climate stress and pre-existing conflicts are also complicating food productions. Many countries where Irish aid programmes are active, including but not exclusively Ethiopia, Syria, Lebanon and Kenya, are particularly exposed to increasing food prices, with the World Food Programme's humanitarian response also vulnerable to increased cereal prices and also increasing transport costs. The situation of many of those at risk has deteriorated. The World Food Programme has reduced its rations to many of those dependent on food distribution, for example in Yemen, where 16.2 million are on food insecure. In addition, the Irish Aid humanitarian response to Ukraine, already exceeding 20 million in response to immediate needs, my department will ensure that the whole of the aid programme is engaged in responding to the wider challenges arising from food security issues and obviously arising from the invasion of Ukraine. Irish Aid has a strong track record from which to build in response to this crisis, building from our global leadership on food systems, including at last year's Food Systems Summit and through our broad membership of the International Fund for Agricultural Development, as well as mainstreaming food across our development programme and humanitarian responses. Ireland has pledged 800 million to nutrition work over 5 years to 2026, including a 3-year strategic partnership with the World Food Programme worth 75 million to provide food assistance to the world's poorest people. In addition, Irish Aid will work with partner governments in the reorientation of social protection programmes and to improve agricultural practices.
Thank you, Minister. And you rightly draw attention to the proud record that Irish Aid has in regard to our overseas development aid programme. And I know that we like to try to fund multi-annual projects, and that's right and correct as an approach, but I do think there need to be exceptional measures taken for the forthcoming food shortages and lack of... And also we need to look forward. I mean, we do know that climate shocks, and it's one of the things that's referenced within the programme for government, we didn't anticipate this level of military crisis, but climate shocks are going to affect agriculture in developing countries more even than it will affect us here. And I think we are going to have to try and take emergency measures in terms of feeding the world's poorest, because unfortunately, as with all of these things, the worst effects of this crisis are going to be played out among those populations who are least able to afford it. So I really think we need to be planning ahead and seeing what we can do as an admittedly small country to help, to help in this matter.
Thank you, Deputy. You're quite right in the analysis which you've made, and we're working with the World Food Programme. As a small country, our best involvement is through those obviously large international organisations. Our commitment with the World Food Programme, where we've obviously put 75 million in there from 2022 to 2024, increasing support to them. But it is absolutely, you're quite right to highlight the case that in a number of key countries where the World Food Programme is the primary source of the supplying the food, there is going to be issues later in the year. We are conscious of that. We are working with that. We are working to ensure that our own aid programmes continue to deliver, while obviously still focusing in relation to Ukraine, that our own aid programmes within those countries continue to function. But there is no question, because of the supply side issue from Ukraine and Russia to the World Food Programme, and because even if that supply side can be met, there will obviously be international price implications in terms of World Food Programme purchasing collectively this is the response that needs to be, and we are working on addressing it now.
Yes, thank you, Minister. And I suppose that draws attention to the fact that we need to have a short-term and immediate response to this crisis in terms of getting food to the most vulnerable. But we also need to have a long-term response in terms of food sovereignty and food security in developing countries. And as I said, we do know, a reference within the programme of government is that vulnerability to climate shocks. And we know that we're going to see that intensify and worsen. And I think there's an important role for Ireland to play in this regard in terms of that long-term overseas development aid and helping countries develop their own food sovereignty and food independence, and particularly those countries, I would say, in sub-Saharan Africa. And a lot of our partner countries are based out of sub-Saharan Africa, and I do hope we see a scaling up of our initiatives from Irish Aid in that regard, and particularly in supporting food systems and in supporting agriculture in developing countries.
Just before the Minister comes in, thank you. Just briefly, Dr. Murray, you want to come in on this? Or, no, the next time, right.
Absolutely, again, just to re-emphasise, on the longer approach, particularly in regard to, say, climate financing and in regard to adaptation, we are absolutely key on this, that what is actually needed is a set of programmes that enable the production of food to take place in a more localised way, to make it as non-dependent on inputs like fertilisers, etc., and that what is needed is the stability of food production in key areas. That's part of our Irish Aid ongoing commitment programme that we are working on, we'll continue to work on strengthening. I think obviously the immediate impact of what has happened in Ukraine is to highlight the fact that these are really key things that need to be addressed. But just to make that commitment, the Irish Aid programme is actually addressing them as we speak in terms of our approach to tackling that food security system.